In the first part of 3.7, we're going to talk about solving absolute value equations. So before we talk about solving absolute value equations, just recall absolute value. Absolute value is the distance from 0 to a number. Distance is always positive. So remember, the distance from a number to 0. Distance is always positive. Or it's 0, because you could be going 0 distance. So positive or 0. So notice that both -5 and +5 are 5 units from 0. And again, since distance is positive, both -5 and +5 in absolute value are both +5. So that's why we say the absolute value of -5 equals +5, and the absolute value of +5 equals +5. So, if I am given the absolute value equation where x is in the absolute value and it equals 5, look on the number line, and again that distance from -5 to 0 and +5 to 0 are both +5. So guess what? When the absolute value of x equals 5, the answer is going to be x equals -5 or x equals +5. As an example, let's solve slightly more complicated absolute value. Absolute value of x minus 1 equals 4. When in doubt, always pretend you're really just dealing with an equation. X minus 1 equals 4. You would add 1 to both sides of the equation. And so, we're back to this familiar case where we have the absolute value of x equals 5. So, since 5 and -5 are the same distance from 0, in absolute value, we have the answer x equals -5 or x equals +5. Example 2, yet more complicated. Solve absolute value of x times 2 plus 3 equals 7. So when in doubt, always remember, what would you do if this were just a regular equation without absolute value? Obviously, you would undo the addition first. You would subtract 3. If that's what you would do with a regular equation, that is exactly what you'll do with the absolute value equation. Next, of course, you would divide by 2 to undo the multiplication. And you end up with 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we have the absolute value of x equals 2. Since 2 and -2 are both positive 2 units from 0, our answer is x equals 2 or +2. However, there is a shorthand notation when I have x equals the same number, both positive and negative. Instead of writing out x equals -2 or x equals +2, I can simply write x equals plus or minus 2. Example 3, solve 2 times the absolute value of x minus 3 equals 6. This is very important. Note, never distribute into an absolute value. Period. End of discussion. Do not distribute into absolute values. Because of that, what we will do then, we can't distribute, so I guess we'll have to divide. So we end up dividing by 2 on both sides of the equation. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So now I have the absolute value of x minus 3 equals 3. That means the entire absolute value, x minus 3, is 3 units from 0. So since -3 and +3 are both 3 units from 0, we end up with 2 equations. One is x minus 3 equals -3, or x minus 3 equals +3. We add 3 in both cases, and we end up with x equals 0 or x equals 6. That ends our discussion. We'll do a lot more in class.